Never try to record a video during Mercury in retrograde. All your shit won't work. It's so real. It's so real. I don't think you're really even I've never even seen these windscreen mic things on a dynamic microphone, but I don't know how else to limit the kind of wind noise that my nostrils are making. Almost forgot that I had a microphone. I don't think I ever want a microphone. What's up, all you current and aspiring drummers? Or maybe you're just on a rhythmic journey, or maybe you like loud drums to fall asleep to. You know, we're each on our own journey. So, welcome to today's drum tutorial of Drunk 2 by Mannequin Pussy on our album Patience. Trying something a little different here because I can't really play loud drums where I'm at. I'm going to be playing this on my practice kit, which you can find all the details about that in the gear breakdown video I did of this kit. The benefit to this is that I can talk while playing at the same time, so maybe this will work out. I also know there's a bunch of times I'll be like, play on the left hand, crash, and then the video I'll play both cymbals. That's because like really anything that's comfortable is going to work. Just use your ears and yeah, don't worry about it too much. There's two main beats that are played in this song. The first one we'll go over is the beat that starts the song, and it goes for 2 measures. Kick in the snare pattern goes 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 2, 3, and 4. Once you get the kick and the snare pattern down, it's just 8th notes with your right hand. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and that locks in exactly with the kick and the snare pattern, even though the kick and the snare pattern sound rather syncopated. 1, 2, 3 and 4 and 2, 3 and 4. 1, 2, 3 and 4 and 2, 3 and 4. So I would lock in that groove before going on to any of the cymbal accents or the variations that are played on the snare. Now that we have that down, we can get into the song. Song is in 4/4, so 4 beats to a measure. The quarter note gets the beat, and the BPM's around 135, but the chorus, it bumps it up a little bit just by 1 or 2 BPM. So to start the song, we play the 2 crash cymbals. It's nice and dramatic. And then rather than going right into the 8th notes, you don't start playing the beat until you come down on the snare on beat 2, and then you play the ride cymbal on beat 2 as well. It just gives a little space. So rather than, it's kind of more dramatic. The first 2 measures after we come in with the 2 crash cymbals were in the beat. The end of that second measure, we're going to play a variation on the snare drum, which is just and you're just playing that on its own, right, left, on the snare drum. So altogether, it sounds like this. So after that, we go back into the beat. No need to come in with a crash cymbal because we're still kind of in that groove. Just go back to the ride after the and on the snare. And we're going to play that main groove again for 2 measures. But at the end of this one, on beat 4, we're going to play the hi-hat open with the snare and on beat 4, and then the kick drum on the and 4. So, which is going to lead us back into the beat. So altogether, that sounds like this. So that fill acts as a transition into the next beat. So just playing it from the end of that section into the next groove. You can kind of try to explain this the best I can, but you don't want to play you don't want to go straight up accents where it sounds uneven, but you don't want to really be playing it straight either. So kind of just use your ears and kind of just, you're kind of, accenting on the downbeats. Rather than that was the first four measures on the drums, so that only counted for one chord on the guitar. Now they go to the next chord, and here's the next 4 measures. So after the 4 end, you go into the double crash, and then go back into the beat. And then we go just back into that groove, the same as we played the first time with that variation on the 4 and on the snare, on the second measure. So, and then we go back into the groove, same as the first time, and the variation at the end of the second measure on this one is a little kind of thing with the left hand and the hi-hat. 3 and 4 and 3 and 4 and 3 and 4 and 3 and 4 and. So altogether, that part sounds like this. So now we're back at the top of the second time the guitar players go through this, their chord progression, and you're just going back again with the double crash and the variation on the snare drum, this beat again. And then the same as the first time with the first 4 measures, we're doing the snare and the hi-hat together on 4, and then the and played on the kick drum. You transition again from that 4 and to the double crash cymbals, go back into the beat, do the same snare variation, and then we're going to, on the end of the next 2 measures, play a fill that leads into the verse. So this fill starts with the rack tom, followed by a flam on the snare, which I went more in depth on flams in the romantic drum tutorial, which is still available on Patreon, and followed by 2 hits on the floor tom. This fill starts on the and of 3, and then 4 is played on the snare, and then of the 4 on the floor toms. Floor tom, singular. And 4 and 4 and 4 and 4 and 4 and 4 and. And then you end that fill on the, if you're sitting where I'm sitting, the left hand crash to go into the verse. So you might want to practice with playing that 3 in there just to get kind of the placement of the fill in the groove. 3 and 4 and 3 and 4 and altogether that sounds like this. I'm not 100% sure I play a flam on that snare drum in that fill, so feel free just to use your left hand to play the snare just as a single hit. And 4 and and 4 and and 4 and 4 and. I actually do think that's how I recorded it, but obviously either way will work. When I did go to record how I played through it, I did the flam just kind of naturally, so either way is cool. worry about playing this song with 2 crash cymbals if you don't have them. I don't usually have them. I had them in the studio, and I just figured I'll show you the way that I recorded it. The cool thing about having the 2 crash cymbals is that it kind of opens up the audio spectrum, I guess. Something like that. So you have these like cymbal melodies, which in the verse, you know, you're playing the left and then the right. It just kind of opens it up in a very, very nice way. I don't usually play 2 crash cymbals live yet. So there's definitely, you don't need to do it that way, but it is cool. So the verse, we come out of that fill, we go to the left-hand crash, and then we go straight to the ride, and we're playing that main beat. So for the first 4 measures of the verse, there's no variation on the snare or anything, so you're just playing the beat, and it sounds like this. And then we come to a little fill, which is a flam on the snare and then a single hit on the floor tom. So 4N, 4N. So including that fill, it sounds like this. And then you go back into the beat. After that fill, you're playing the right-hand crash on beat 1. And then you're also adding in the snare variation, the anda on beat 4 on the second measure. You go back into the groove, and then you play on the second measure a little fill that goes rack tom, snare tom, floor tom, and 4N, and 4N. Out of that fill by playing the left-hand crash and then going back into the groove, and we're doing that same little snare variation, the anda on the 4. So playing the next part, going from that fill, sounds like this. So after that snare variation, going back into the groove, just like the first time, you're gonna play at the in 2 measures. You're gonna play that snare fill on with the flam on beat 4, and then the and on the floor tom, and you're gonna go into the right hand crash. So all together, that sounds like this. So you kind of see the pattern, you know, left, right, left, right. So you go back into the groove, playing the snare variation, the anda on the second measure, and then on the third measure, we're gonna start to build on the ride cymbal to get into, I guess you would call it the pre-chorus. And then that same 4N, and then it's the double crashes. So all together, that sounds like this. So if you've noticed, we started crashing on the ride cymbal. The verse, we went to just playing on the ride cymbal, just normally. And now we're back to crashing on it. That kind of loud, quiet, loud thing that indie bands love to do because it's effective and super cool. So at the end of that verse, we went back to crashing on the ride cymbal. So feel free to come back in with the double crash for a nice dramatic entrance into the pre-chorus. So the pre-chorus, we're back into playing that main groove, and we're doing that accent on the snare, the anda with the right left, which probably more than like not where we play that with that groove. All these little variations that happen in this section we've played before. So with each grouping of the groove, on the second measure, the first one is the snare variation. The second time it does the snare with the hi-hat on beat 4, and then the and on the anda 4 on the kick drum. Again, then the next time it's the anda on the snare, and then it's the flam on the snare with the floor tom beat on 4 and. Going into the chorus, then we're going to play on the crash cymbal, and it's very hard to just explain, so here's how it sounds all together. Feel free to keep up the dramatic double crashing. So the first time we play this chorus introduces the second main beat of the song, which is my Desert Island favorite beat of all time, which is the constant eighth notes on the kick, constant except for the 2 and the 4s, which will be played on the snare. Well, also actually almost constantly on the eighth notes, except for when you're playing the open hi-hat on the anda 4. So from that flam floor tom fill that took us from the pre-chorus into the chorus, we play the left hand. You can play it with your left hand, but left side crash cymbal to go into the chorus. So 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 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 4 and. So if we group that beat again in 2 measures, you're playing that 3 times with the open hi-hat on the anda 4. And to do that, you just raise your left foot on the anda 4 and then come down with your foot on the downbeat on beat 1 and 1 and 1. The fourth time we play this groove, at the end of the second measure, we're going to do a little fill, which is going to be flams on the snare on beats 3 and 4. And then you're going to play a kick drum with a closed hi-hat on the and of 3, and then a kick drum with an open hi-hat on the and of 4. 3 and 4 and 3 and 4 and. So altogether, the first half of the chorus sounds like this. So the second half of the chorus, there's no crashes or anything leading into it. You're just chilling on the hi-hat. This has a few more variations on the that groove we're playing. Drum 2, chorus take 2. All right, so we're back after some technical difficulties. I did work on editing the footage I had a bit while I figured out some camera issues, and I do a lot of like breathing out of my nose that I didn't realize that I do when I play. So sorry for like some wind sounds. I have this screen here. I'm gonna see if that works. We left off at that fill. So after that fill, you just go back into playing that same beat with the open hi-hat on the and of 4 on the second measure. And then I'm going to talk about the next 3 measures of the song because the fill kind of attaches 2 of them together. So for 1 measure, you're just playing 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And then the next one, you play 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and which is the beginning of the fill, and then that leads into the next measure, which is still the same kick and snare pattern, but you have an open hi-hat on the downbeat. So those three measures together sound like this. So you're starting that fill with the hi-hat and the snare together, right, left on the snare, and then the hi-hat open, and then with the kick drum on beat 1 of the next measure. 4 under 1, 4 under 1, 4 under 1. So coming out of that fill, we're starting the next beat with that open hi-hat, and then you're playing that closed for 2 times. And then you just start gradually building it up on the third go around of that beat. And then for the final measure of this first chorus, you're going to play the beat with the open hi-hat for the first half, and then we play a fill at the end of it. So that fill goes right, left, right, kick, and then you play the hands together. So snare, rack tom, floor tom, kick, hi-hat, and snare. And when you come out of that fill, you're double crashing. So this is, I guess you could call it like the pre-verse. It leads into the second verse, so pre-verse 2. So after we play that fill, the 3 and a 4, then we come in again with the double crash, and we go back to the beat, no accent on the snare for the first time, and crashing on the ride. So we're playing that groove, crashing on the ride. At the end of the fourth measure, we play a little fill that starts on beat 3. You're going to play the ride and kick drum on beat 3, left, right on the snare on the E and of 3, and on the of 3, you play the kick drum. 3, E, and Next, you play the snare and the hi-hat on beat 4, followed by a kick drum on the E of 4, and then the you play on the snare right left. 4E and 4E and So the whole fill sounds like this. And then you're going to want to come out of that fill on the left hand crash with your right hand. So then you go back to the groove, coming out of that fill on the left hand crash, and we're going to do the little snare variation again. So for the final 2 measures of this section, the pre-verse 2 or re-intro, we're going to go back into the beat, but we're going to play some variations with your left hand on the hi-hat that kind of act as a transition into the verse. You're playing the left hand on the hi-hat on the and of 4 of the first measure that we're talking about, and then on the and of 2 and beat 3 on the second measure. So the and of 4, you actually play just the hi-hat on its own with the kick drum. So you're kind of like just leaving that space from the ride cymbal. And then the and of 2 and the 3, you're playing with the ride cymbal. So the cymbal part goes like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. If it's more comfortable to lock in that that hi-hat hit with the right hand, just add it in there. I just leave the space, I guess, because it sounds cleaner. I don't know. That's just how I've played it. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Again, just such a little difference. Either way is cool. And then we go into verse 2, which is louder, so feel free to do the double crashes. So the second verse, we bring up the dynamics. We're crashing on the ride cymbal, but we're still playing the same beat that we played for the first verse. So for the first 4 measures of the song, we're playing that same beat with the little snare accent and then also the 4-end that we've played before. But we're playing loudly, so use the 2 crash cymbals. And for the next 4 measures, we play the beat the same way as we did at the beginning of verse 2, where we come in with the 2 crashes, we do the little snare accent. This time on the 4th measure, we play a fill that starts on the and of 3. You're going to play the and of 3 on the snare and left hand crash, followed by 4 anda played on the snare, rack tom, and then 2 floor tom hits. And then you end that fill on the 1 of the next measure by playing the right hand crash with the kick drum. It might help to think of that one too starting on the 3, so 3 and 4 and 1. So since we came out of that fill on the right hand crash, we go back into the beat, but we started it on this crash instead of doing the double crashes. You can go for it and play the 2, but it's kind of weird. Let's try it. I wouldn't do that. Scratch that. Scratch it. Don't try that. So since we played that fill coming out on the right hand crash, you just play that and then go back into the beat, and then you play the beat with the little snare variation and the same 4-end just like we did at the beginning of verse 2. So I'll take it from that fill leading into it. And then back into the double crashes, you play the beat again with the little snare variation, and then we're going to play a fill to go into the chorus, which we did when we went into the chorus the first time, and that's playing a flam on the snare, followed by a hit on the floor tom. So I'll take it from the 4-and just to show the transition. Okay, we've made it all the way to the second chorus, which has a lot of little variations. So we came in from the 4 and with the flam on the snare and the and of 4 on the floor tom. Then you come into the chorus on the left hand crash. And then we're going into that same beat that we played for the first chorus with the open hi-hat on the and of 4. So here's where the little variations begin. This one is on the second measure. We play the and of 3 with an open hi-hat and a kick drum, and also the and of 4. I'm not sure 100% that I play a kick drum on the and of 4, but it feels right. I'm pretty sure that's what happens. Then for 2 measures, you're playing constant 8th notes on the kick. Since we're not doing the open hi-hat, you do play the and of 4 on the kick as well. So this next part, we'll just take in little pieces. If you do look at the notation, there are some things I don't really know how to express notating them out. This is one of them, because it's not really like the sound of the hi-hat goes away for the and of 1, but it's just played once on the 1, and you're playing the 2 8th notes on the kick drum, so it's 1 and 1 and. You kind of just, I don't know, it just kind of hangs there. The snare hi-hat stuff here sounds a little fancy. It's kind of hard to explain, so we'll take it in pieces. So it starts with 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and, followed by the hi-hat with the kick drum for 3 and then you play the snare and the hi-hat on beat 4, followed by just the hi-hat on the and of 4. 4 and 3 and 4 and. Here's where that little fill starts. It starts on the of 4. So you play left right on the snare, a 1, and then you play the kick drum and the hi-hat on the and of 1, and then you play the hi-hat and the snare on beat 2. And then just a hi-hat on the and of 2. Followed by a 3 and on the hi-hat and the kick drum, which is then followed by a 4 and right, left on the snare drum. So that's all very confusing, but altogether it sounds like this. So for the next 2 measures, we're playing the constant kick drum. We start it with an open hi-hat on beat 1, and then we end it with a 4 and fill on the snare. So we go back to that same constant 8th note on the kick groove. Again, we start the beat with an open hi-hat on beat 1. On the second measure this time, we're going to play a little fill that starts on the and of 3. We're going to do 2 open hi-hats with snare, and then just right left on the snare. And coming from that fill, we're going back into the groove again with the open hi-hat. So that transition sounds like this. So going from that little fill, we do go back into the groove again, starting with the open hi-hat. So just, you might want to practice with that in there for that transition. And then from there, we play 4 measures of that constant 8th note on the kick groove. Now this is another thing I didn't really know how to notate. I talk about the kind of like one-handed little buzz roll in the Romantic video. Basically on the and of 4 at the end of this to transition into I guess I would call that the pre-outro. When it goes to the ride cymbal, I do a little one. Totally not necessary because you could definitely go. As a transition, that totally works. Or you could do a little, just like a quiet one. I'll play it how I would normally play it with that little one-handed kind of buzz roll thing. But again, totally don't have to do that. I would just not play the kick drum on the and of 4 there. So I guess this is kind of the pre-outro. We come from doing that little snare roll, again, which I don't know how to notate, but also is completely optional. We're playing the main groove on the ride cymbal, playing the ride cymbal normally, lightly, like a ride cymbal. And there's no little snare accents for the first time we go around on this beat. You can start to build it up a little bit on the ride cymbal before that fill if you want to. And then we play a fill at the end of the 4th measure that starts on beat 3, and it's played in 16th notes. So I don't remember exactly if I used the crash cymbal or if I crashed on the ride for this. Anything that's comfortable will work. So you play the first hit with a kick and a cymbal hit, a cymbal of your choice, on the downbeat on beat 3, followed by a left-right on the floor tom, which is followed by a kick. And then on beat 4, you're playing the snare with, again, a crashing on the cymbal of your choice, followed by a kick drum and a right-left on the floor tom. So I would end that fill on a cymbal that you weren't playing that fill on, just so it audibly stands out that you are coming out of that fill. So after that fill, we go back into the main beat, but we're crashing on the ride, and then we add in that little snare variation as well. So similar to when we have played the accents with the hi-hat with our left hand while we're on the ride cymbal before, we're using that as kind of a transition into the next section. I'm not 100% sure I play that ride cymbal on the and of 3 with the kick drum, so you could leave that out. Either way, it's such a little difference if you add that in or if you take it out. the outro, feel free to come in with the 2 crashes, and then we're going to go back to the Desert Island 8th note on the kick drum. We are going to play the and of 4 on the kick drum for these. And for this part, you can kind of leave the hi-hat a little open. So while the choruses, we were playing it closed, this one's a little washier. And to do that, you just kind of lift your left foot a little bit up from the hi-hat pedal. So after those 2 measures, for the sake of cymbal melodies, we would start the next go around of the beat on the right hand crash. And then at the end of the 2 measures here, we're doing a little fill between the cymbals and the snare. So we'll look at the next 2 measures because the fill kind of joins those together. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So you're starting on the and of 2, playing the left hand crash with the kick drum, the snare drum, together with the hi-hat on the on beat 3. You're going between the crash and the kick drum and the hi-hat and the snare. For the beginning, the first 2 hits are on the left-hand crash. And 3 and 4. And then we play the and of 4 with the kick drum on the right-hand crash. And 3 and 4 and. So this is a little tricky because I played this left-hand crash actually with my left hand, and it's just with the kick on beat 1, 1. And then the and of 1, we play just the kick drum with no cymbals. So 1 and. The reason this is played with your left hand is because you're doing kind of a right-left with the and of 4 that was played with the right hand crash at the end of that last measure. So the sequence there, starting from the and of 4, you're playing the right-left on the crash, then there's a kick between those cymbal hits, then there's the snare with the right hand crash on beat 2, followed by a kick hit that is on the and of 2. And then we go back into the constant 8th note kick drum rock beat. And 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And then you just play another measure of the. And then since we ended that fill on the right hand crash, I would come in the next measure with the left hand crash. And then again, for the sake of switching it up, we'll do a little fill at the end of the measure here that will start on the right hand crash. This fill starts with the crash and the snare on the and of 3, and then we play 4 and right left on the snare. So that's a lot to take in, but basically the first part of the outro altogether sounds like this. You notice I have my little notes here because there's a lot in this section, so. We come back in for 2 measures, starting with the left hand crash cymbal. Then we go to the right hand crash and play that beat again for a measure. So this is kind of a tricky fill to explain because there's a triplet in here. I still don't really know how I would count it in the beat. So this measure starts with a 1 and 2, and then we play a triplet followed by a hit. So it's right, left, triplet 3, triplet 3. And it kind of is a little quick, then you're going from that left hand playing the 3 to a crash and a kick drum on the and of 3, and then you're playing the snare on 4 just by itself in between the 2 crashes, and then you're playing a crash with the kick drum on the and of 4. And then for the downbeat of the next measure, you're playing the left hand crash with your left hand. Again, that's because you're doing a right-left with these 2 cymbals. And if you don't have another crash cymbal, just crash on the ride to do that. And then there's a kick drum in between the left hand crash with the kick. And then you play the right hand crash again with the snare drum, very similar to that first kind of cymbal snare fill we did. I think that fill in particular, same with the other cymbal and snare fill that we just played before this, really highlights that whole cymbal melody thing. And then you're playing another kick drum on its own on the and of 2 after that cymbal hit there, to just get back into that 8th note desert island rock groove. And then another measure of that desert island rock groove. Now I can't wait to explain this fill, because after this, the rest of the video should be pretty easy to film. This is the last kind of big fill, provided we don't have any more of these technical difficulties. Let's just take that out of what we just put into the universe. So as soon as I said that, my sister called me, and for some reason when you get called, your iPhone stops recording video. So we come in here playing the left hand crash into the beat, and then this fill is going to start pretty much on beat 4. We're going to do a 4 and a. So this fill is basically just 16th notes split up kind of in a little bit of an odd way. The next part of the fill is played on the next measure. 1 is played with your right hand on the snare, followed by a kick drum on the E of 1, followed by the snare and the hi-hat on the and of 1, and the kick drum on the of 1. Then we're going to play the 2E and on the snare drum, right, left, right, followed by a kick on the of 2. 4 and the 1E and the 2E and. Then we play a snare drum with a hi-hat on beat 3, followed by a kick on the E of 3, and then the and we play on the snare, right, left. 3E and 3E and. And then finally, to end the fill, we play the snare on beat 4, the rack tom on the E of 4, and the anda on the floor tom. 40 anda. So a good way to practice for this fill would be playing right kick, right, left, right kick. And then you can end that fill on the right or left crash, whichever one's more comfortable. right, can you all believe it? We're at the last part of the song. I can't believe it. Feels good. Feels really, really good. So for this final part, even though we are crashing on the ride, I did switch between the crash cymbals for the left-right melody kind of thing. So after that crazy fill, I just tried to explain, you come out on the left-hand crash and then go to crashing on the ride. And for this part, we're playing that same Desert Island rock beat, the 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So at the end of the fourth measure here, we are playing a flam on beat 3 on the snare, followed by a kick with the hi-hat on the and of 3, and then the same thing again on beat 4. 3 and 4 and. And then we go back into the groove again with the left-hand crash. And then at the end of the fourth measure here, we're going to play the and of 3 with the snare and the left-hand crash, and then 4 anda on the snare, right, left, right, left. I do kind of repeat hitting that crash there, but I think that sounds better to my ears. Again, just switch it up however you like. And then again, we go back to the left-hand crash, playing that beat again, doing that same 3 and 4 and fill at the end of this time. And then finally, we go back into the left-hand crash, we play that beat again, and then we play the same kind of fill that we played to get into the verse at the very beginning of the song, which is... Again, if you want to play the flam, I know I played the flam here, but still it would sound just as good if you just played your left hand with the single hit for the snare hit, but it's the rack, snare, 2 hits on the floor tom. And 4 enda. I also think I played a kick with that rack tom. Again, not really a noticeable difference if you don't. And 4 enda. And 4 enda. Either way, it's chill. It's going to be in time, which is the most important thing, and transition to the final part of the song. So then we go into playing the main beat, the first groove we learned. We're playing on the ride cymbal just normally, no crashing on it. And we play that for the first 4 measures with no little accents on the snare. And we're going to, at the end of the 4th measure, do the flam on the snare on beat 4 and the and of beat 4 on the floor tom, the 4 and. So from that little fill, we go into the right-hand crash. We play that beat again, but we are playing the snare variation on the 2nd measure. So then on the 3rd measure here, we play that beat, again, a very little difference. I do keep the 8th notes like constant on the cymbals for this 4th measure. So there is, just for the downbeat on the 4, you do play the ride cymbal just on its own, and then you begin building up to just the big hit at the end on the right-hand crash with the floor tom and the kick. And 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Again, feel free to move that kind of build up to any cymbals you have. you're hitting that final note, feel free to be as dramatic as you want. If you have a gong, I would play that. That would be pretty cool. Thank you so much, Patreon. Y'all rock. Hope you enjoyed this drum lesson.